welcome to One Tourism World, a convergence point and the global hub for pioneers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries from the global tourism and hospitality sectors. We bring to you an exciting platform featuring distinguished leaders ready to share their groundbreaking ideas on cutting-edge topics that are revolutionizing the industry. Our experts come from a diverse set of fields, including luxury hospitality, ecotourism, digital transformation, and more, and are all set to unravel the latest in industry developments. One Tourism World is a vibrant community here on the One Business World platform that encourages collaboration and open dialogue to catalyze positive change within the tourism and hospitality sectors. So join us now in this discovery of innovation and growth, and let's shape the future together at One Tourism World. This morning, his evening, we're joined by Jason Gelineau. He is the Director of Hospitality for JAG Hospitality, a consulting company. He is the former head of hotel operations for Explorer Journeys, and he's joining us today from Perth, Australia. And his topic and our conversation this morning is going to be the recruitment and retention of hospitality staff in a post-pandemic world. Jason, good evening. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Glenn. Great to meet you. And finally, after many communications back and forth, and to be able to participate in One Tourism World in the future of hospitality.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we look forward to your insights and our conversation here today. Why don't you open up, Jason, just by giving us a little bit about your background to our audience?
Thanks, Glenn. Be a pleasure. So as you mentioned, my name is Jason Gelineau. I'm currently the director of JAG Hospitality, which is a hospitality service consultancy. I was most recently head of hotel operations for Explorer Journeys, which I'll describe a bit more of that in detail. Originally, I am from Ottawa, Canada, but I've called Perth, Western Australia, where I'm dialing in from home since the mid-90s. It's a milder temperature and laid-back lifestyle, and a great place to be based. I have been in the hospitality and service industry for my entire career. It all started, Glenn, when I was going to high school in Jamaica. My uncle, who I was living with, was a banker in the West Indies, and I used to go and visit him. And then there was a period where I lived with him when I was 14 and 15, and he was vice president of credit for a Canadian bank down there. And so as someone who's able to give out money, we were invited to a lot of resorts and hotels, particularly on the northwest coast of Jamaica. And so as a 14, 15-year-old kind of influence in what I wanted to do in the future, here I was visiting all these world-class resorts and along the beach. And I'm thinking, wow, this is not bad. This is a bit better than winter in Ottawa, Canada. And when I returned back to Canada to finish my high school, my guidance counselor had asked me what I had learned while I was down there. And I explained, what I had been exposed to and what I found interesting. And she said, well, knowing you, you've got a very outgoing personality. You're very much a people person. I really think that hospitality and tourism would be a good career path for you. Well, how many years later? That was in 1987. So here we are, 36 years later, and I followed that. I started as a dishwasher in a chicken and rib restaurant in my hometown of Canada, and then moved into hotels and resorts as a bellboy and made my way through the different positions up until a duty manager. But, we went back to my time in the Caribbean and getting away from winter, something said to me, there's more out there, and I wanted to travel the world. I'm the generation that grew up on the Love Boat, and so cruising seemed to be an option. And I was hired by that time, Princess Cruises, which was the Love Boat, as a junior assistant purser in 1994. And my goal was to travel for a couple of years, see a bit of the world, save a bit of money, and then, settle back down on land and continue my career. Well, again, as I said, many years later, here we are, I'm still in the industry. I fell in love with it. It was, when you feel at home somewhere, or you just think this is natural, that's what I found with cruising. And so I really worked hard to grow my career. And after my time with Princess, and I spent 6 years with them, I moved over into the luxury sector with Silversea Cruise Lines in 2000. And at that time, there were just two small ships, and we're growing their fleet. And I was a chief purser with Silversea. I then moved on to a very unique ship, which was the first and still the only residential cruise ship at sea, the World of Residency, where people buy apartments and live on board. And I was with them for a couple of years. And then the drawback to regular cruising, where your guest actually left at the end of a cruise, came up, and I returned to regular cruising with Oceania Cruises. And it was there in 2008 that I was promoted to hotel general manager. In between, I took some time off when my daughter was finishing high school here in Australia. And I did various things. I worked in aviation as a operations manager for a ground handling company here in Perth. I worked for a entertainment venue operating high-end concerts and sporting events. And then I took a dab into self-employment, and I owned and operated a food truck. Very interesting, going from luxury to $5 sandwiches, but it's what I did. It was at the time of the movie Chef. But then I
talk about
returned
the bell curve, right? You come all the way back to, to the food truck.
it
Wow.
was interesting. And people call it, or I call it, my midlife crisis. You know, some people get a Ferrari. I got a food truck, and she was demanding, and she took a lot of my time. But it was a lot of an incredible journey, and that was so rewarding. One, it was, I built it. So not only the brand and the image, the marketing, the product, all of the admin of getting the events and things like that, that was me. But it was also, you know, the people that I got to meet, even in that level of hospitality, because service is service, regardless if you're serving a $5 sandwich or you're serving, you know, Michelin star cuisine. It's, at the end of the day, it's service. But I got drawn back into the cruise industry because my daughter was accepted to go to college in Boston at Berklee College of Music, and I wanted to be closer to her, so I returned to sea with Seabourn and was with them for 3 years. And then in 2019, I made the final move to step off ships full time and hang up my sailor's uniform and join the MSC group in their US operations as a brand performance manager, overseeing the ships based in the US, and the opening of their new destination resort in the Bahamas, Ocean Key Marine Reserve. And with my being involved with MSC, which is a growing company. It's a privately owned company based out of Geneva by the Aponte family and Pier Francesco Vago, who is the chairman of the cruise division. A truly strong company, growing and not only in cargo and in ferries, but of course, you know, they have a large cruise line. Well, then they decided that, you know, there was a new area of business that they wanted to get into, and they felt that there was a gap, and that was luxury cruising for the European market. And so the idea came about for this, what they called at the time, Next Gen Lux. And this was during the pandemic. And funny enough, one of the reasons I got into hospitality, not only because of my wanting to go back to Jamaica and my being a people person, was that something said to me that no matter the climate of the economy, people always need to eat and sleep. It may not be extravagant, but people will need to travel and sleep. And so I felt that being in the hospitality industry, I would always find employment. Well, boy, you know, 3 years ago, the pandemic proved that, in that, you know, the cruising industry stopped. I returned home to Australia. I was based in Miami at the time. And I started delivering wine for a friend because we were in a little kind of a bubble here in Australia. They had shut everything down, and so we were living in this little you know, bubble where there was no COVID, and so our restaurants were booming, and no one could go anywhere, so everyone was going out to restaurants. And so a friend of mine who had a wine business said, "Look, I need someone to deliver wine." I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything at the moment," and so I did that. But in that time, I got a call from Geneva and said, "Listen, you know, we are moving forward with this new luxury cruise line that we've been planning, and we'd like you to support us in a consulting team style basis while the industry shut down." Well, that started in August 2020, and then in September 2021, I moved to Geneva and took up the full-time position of head of hotel operations, or head of product, for Explorer Journeys, which was the name that was given to the brand. A brand of, you know, currently one ship. It was just christened in New York back in October by the legendary Dr. Sylvia Earle. She's sailing in the Caribbean at the moment. 900 guests, 640 crew. We worked with incredible brands like Moet Hennessy and Illy and Technogym and Steinway and Sons, and so truly a wonderful brand. But it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago that I raised my head from what I had been doing, and it was an incredibly intense but such rewarding project. I mean, how often do you get to start a luxury cruise brand? The last time that was done was over 30 years ago with Silversea in '94 and Seabourn in '88. And so to be given a blank piece of paper and the support of the family to do that was incredibly rewarding. But what I found was I was neglecting my family time, and my daughter had then moved back to Australia, and my friends here and my home is here. And so I made the decision that, you know, with what we had done and what we had delivered, I was very proud of, and truly, it is best in class, in my opinion, that it was time to move back home. And so I did that. I arrived home 2 weeks ago, actually, and I'm now setting up my own consultancy business called Jag Hospitality, to give back to the hospitality industry, and use the expertise, the knowledge, the experience, as well as the network that I've had. But one of the things that I have found, and when we started discussing this webinar, was the post-pandemic, the challenges that we had since then, in not only in recruitment. And here we are talking about hospitality and tourism, but Glenn, we were briefly talking just before we started the webinar that this is carrying over into many other industries. But as someone who's traveled considerably for the last two, actually during the pandemic, I traveled around the world during the pandemic because I had to for work. What I found was, severe lack of service, and a lot of that was down to just people did not want to get back into hospitality. And as we started our brand, and started to recruit for staff, we found that challenge. Like, how do we, we want to be best in class. We want to provide this luxury experience, but it's so challenging to find staff in a regular hotel or resort on land. How do we get those to come away for sea, and to be able to give to our future guests the service and hospitality that we want to give? It's a very competitive world. And so there are many things that we did differently, and I'll go into that. But I think first and foremost, one thing that it's kind of disappointing in our industry is that during the pandemic, a lot of our staff come from countries that have no social systems, and they had no support during the pandemic, and a lot of, that was really hard because a lot of companies were not able to support them in their time of need, and I think that was a root cause of why a lot of people didn't come back as well. But I'm proud to say, the industry is back, and the ships are full, but we still struggle in hospitality, and I've seen that in hotels and resorts. I've seen that, of course, in the cruise industry, in finding people, and what is it we can do as employers, as an industry, to encourage people to come back or come into the hospitality and tourism industry, and what are our responsibilities as employers, as an industry, for them, and probably to a few things. First of all, what we forget is that a lot of, or majority of people in hospitality and tourism, first of all, they're working on social hours. They're working over holidays. They're working late at night. They're working long hours. They're missing out on time with their family. The pandemic, I think, brought a lot of people back to their families who had been working away, whether it was offshore or at sea, or in foreign markets and stuff like that. And they realized that family time is important. So I think first and foremost, one of the most important things we can do as employers and as an industry is ensure that we never lose sight of that we are what we do in our jobs, and we create incredible businesses and services, but we can never forget that at the end of the day, we are just a business and we are just a job. Our team members, our employees, our resources have families, and it's important that we allow time for them to have with their families. And how do you do that with people who work at sea or work offshore, say in the Middle East or in foreign markets? And that, well, one of the ways, and I know you were recently talking to Colin from Virgin Voyages, and I was listening to your webinar, and he hit on some great points that we had done. First of all, what I felt was important was length of contracts. The cruise industry has been renowned over the years for having these long contracts, whether it's 6, 8, 10, 12 months. And while it might be good financially for a lot of the crew, as a responsible or duty of care that we have as an employee, doesn't give you health and well-being. There's no human being that can work 8 to 10 months, 7 days a week, and when they sign off at the end of 10 months are still 100%. And so we have to be responsible by providing, health and well-being levels of contracts, whether it's shorter contracts, 4, 5, 6 months, or it's very difficult to give time off on board. But, if that's an option, a half day or late starts and things like that, to give the staff time to connect with their families, to have time for themselves to relax and to refresh. That was one of the most important things when I set up Explore Journeys, and with the team and our people's team. I said, it was very important that our front of house staff did no more than 5 months, because in my experience, and I spent 24 years at sea, you could see the decline in people's performances and their personalities after that 4.5 to 5 month mark. And while they may have been there physically, mentally or emotionally, they weren't fully there. And that wasn't fair on them, but it also wasn't fair on the guests, because the guest is paying for a full experience. They're not paying for a 75% experience or an 80% experience, but sometimes that's what we're getting. And so, a lot of people, and I go back to when I first went to sea, the breakdown of nationalities was quite different than it is today. When I first went to sea, I'd say 70% of the crew on board were there for the travel. And you had a lot of people from England, Italy, the Scandinavian countries, Canada, US, Mexico, and then of course, places like the Philippines and other parts of Europe. And the Philippines was another big part. But now you're finding it's the opposite. It's probably about 80% of the team members on board now are there for financial gain, and maybe 20%, if you're lucky, are there for the travel. What has attracted those for the travel is those shorter contracts that don't want to do 6-7 months. And so you've got to look at what's the motivator, what's the reason people are there. So, first of all, the length of the contracts. Then, of course, another topic comes up, and I think this applies to land-based hotels, resorts, and restaurants, is the remuneration. We've got to be understanding that the value of investing in good employees who will give back on your investment, because they'll be loyal, they'll get to know your guests, they'll get to know your product. You don't have to recruit so frequently. Is there, but a lot of companies are very short-sighted by saving at the beginning, and then they have this ongoing wheel of people coming and going, and of course, you lose that. You spend all that time recruiting and then training, and then you lose that, and you don't retain that. The other thing, which I think is important right now, is investing in their well-being and their health, and many ways that can be done. First and foremost, when you work in an environment like a cruise ship, where you have people that live on board on the ship, one of the most important things is nutrition, is the food. And it's one of the biggest complaints or negatives you hear sometimes in the cruise industries, is the quality of the food. Or you'll hear about people saying, what's the food like, before they go through with an interview process. Because, we all eat at least three meals a day. And for us to be able to give and have our energy, we need to be properly fed and nourished. And you cannot cut and save on the money you spend on the food for your team members and expect them to then produce the same quality of service and energy. So that was one thing that was really important. And to me, having been in the industry and being on ships where we didn't do it well, but I've also been on ships where we really did it well. If the company and the management truly care, it can be done. It's not requiring a huge investment. It only requires investment in time, because to be creative and to create unique opportunities, you are catering to different nationalities, but healthy food is healthy food. It's fresh fruit and vegetables. It's less oil and butter and grease and things like that, and carbs. So there's many ways of doing that. But the other thing, and we hear so much of this in guest experience in today's world about health and well-being. It's such a buzzword, because it's such an important part of travel and leisure. We did this at Explore Journeys, where we set up Ocean Wellness, an in-house spa and wellness brand, which included, working with the culinary team on dietary and of course yoga. So there's well-being, there's fitness, working with Techno Gym. There's aromatherapy associates, one of the essential oils that gives you that relaxation. Well, how about doing that for your staff as well? And it may not be to the full extent that you have a spa for your staff. I understand that space is not possible sometimes, but allowing things like yoga classes for your staff, fitness classes for your staff, meditation classes for your staff. And for those that want to participate, it gives them that opportunity, because it's no more just about having a bar, a crew bar, a staff bar where people just go and drink, because that's not health and well-being, because we need to take care of the mind. The other areas, of course, are enrichment, keeping the staff engaged, whether it's through additional education opportunities, whether it's through enrichment, learning, presenting webinars, TED Talks, those type of things to your team members, because we're all hungry for knowledge, and it's so easy to access that information now, and that gives an opportunity. The other things are recognizing, when people invest now, when they do come into an industry such as upside tourism, they want to know that they're going to get something out of it. And it's not just the remuneration, which, I think that goes without saying, but they're going to get potential growth in the career. So they're going to get value in that I have a future in this company. And, when I go into this company, the job I'm going into is not a dead end. I don't want to be a waiter for the next 10 years or a suite attendant for the next 10 years. I want to grow. I want possibilities. I want the company to encourage it, to provide learning opportunities and education opportunities to make me a better candidate for growth. The other areas are giving back in the sense of, how do I participate in some of those experiences? So if you're on a ship, maybe it's allowing them to go on some of the shore excursions or attending some of the enrichment or entertainment offerings in the ship. Okay, you can't give the whole ship out to the crew. I get that. We had a saying in the industry, it's a cruise ship, not a cruise ship. However, if you don't have a crew, you don't have a cruise ship. So, you've got to remember what's important here. The other areas, of course, is recognizing people in your day to day, and we work, and you think of the chef of the 80s and the 70s, screaming and throwing things and stuff like that. And I'm not going to lie, cruise ships were not that far off in that sense of management style. And it was people that came through in the industry that may not have gone to formal education and came into the industry and they were good at it. However, what they lacked was people management skills. A lot of that has changed in the world. And so how we recognize and reward our team members, as simple as getting to know their names, knowing something personal about them, spending time with them. When you say you have an open door policy, make sure the door's open. I hear that saying so many times, yet you get I'm busy. No, I can't come back. I haven't got time, and you're like, well, don't really have a door open. So if you have an open door policy, make sure. I found that when I was working on the ships as a general manager and hotel director, and it was easy to do when you walk the floor. Manage by walking the floor. Don't manage from an office, manage by walking the floor. And you'd be amazed when you're working with your team, especially when you see them day in and day out. You get to know them sometimes better than your family. You can sense when something's not right, and I remember walking around and seeing a colleague and saying, you just don't see yourself, what's going on? And to find out that he was having marital problems back home and things like that. And these things are important because a lot of times the team members think, as managers, as leaders, that, oh, you're too busy, you don't have time for me. Well, if I haven't got time for you, then I haven't got time for everything else. You are the core of why we're here. I've worked on incredible ships with incredible itineraries, incredible suites, incredible public rooms. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the heart of the operation, the people, you really don't have an operation. A saying that I always had, and anybody who's worked with me and has been part of my team, they'll have heard this term many times, but I truly believe it. I said, we're not like a sports team. We don't hire extras to warm the bench. In our operation, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, a resort, an airline, a tour group, or a cruise ship, if I hire you, it's because I need you. I need every team member on the playing field at once. And there's no extras here. So you are an integral part of being here. And if you don't have that person, again, going back to not being able to recruit or to retain or not rewarding or recognizing them, then you really are going to struggle and your guests are going to see that. The other thing that I've found, and I'm very fortunate, I sit here now talking to you, Glenn, looking back at my career, it's been very rewarding. I've worked hard. I've achieved a lot more than I anticipated. Starting as a dishwasher in my native Canada. The experiences that I've had, you couldn't put a price on. The people I've met, the places I've been, the travel, the food, the wine, the entertainment, all of those opportunities have come to me because of my career. And it's something that when I give back, when I go back to hospitality schools and I present on cruise line employment, I actually worked for a short period when I had my food truck as an apprentice mentor for chefs because we were struggling in Australia for people to finish their apprenticeship and we weren't getting chefs. Is that, it is an incredible career. The industry in tourism and hospitality, while it's very hard, it's hard work, it's long hours, it's unsociable hours, the reward of what you get back and the experiences to me is incredible. There'll be a day where my body says, you can't travel anymore. You need to stay at home. I buy my lazy boy, I put on my big screen. And as long as I've got this, I'll always have that memories of the things that I was able to do. And the friends that I've met, the wonderful network that I have of business friends and colleagues around the world has been incredible. And I think as we start to try and attract a new generation into our industry, we got to remind them of the benefits of it. Not that it's just a job. There are so many benefits. One of the things I meant to mention earlier, where we've seen a shift as well is recruiting grounds. And now, where we've started to find a huge recruitment ground is in Africa, particularly in Zimbabwe, Kenya, going into Ghana, even into Ethiopia. South Africa has been a big country for many years. The hospitality is incredible. And a lot of these countries, particularly in Zimbabwe and Kenya, their English is immaculate. They speak English as almost as a first language. During our recruitment process, our timing was on our side. Well, okay, it wasn't on our side that we started to develop a luxury brand during the pandemic, but when we came out, we debuted our ship in August of this past year, and we spent a lot of time in the Middle East, particularly in Qatar and Doha, and they were just coming out of the World Cup last year, and so during the World Cup, they went on a huge recruitment drive. They hired an incredible amount of hospitality professionals from all over the world, but particularly a lot of the African countries. They gave them incredible training because they were working for brands such as St. Regis and Mandarin Oriental and Kempinski and Shangri-La. Well, their 2-year contracts were coming up to an end in January and February. Our timing was perfect. We had the most amazing recruitment trips there, and the quality of staff we had that came out of there was just top notch. Now, we get them on the ship. So we had 60% of our front of house staff, our non-technical staff, were new to cruising, had never been on cruise ships before. Was it a strategy? Partially it was, because we wanted to develop a brand that was not a cruise brand. Like Virgin's done, Virgin Voyages, it wasn't Virgin Cruises. Explorer Journeys wasn't Explorer Cruises, it was Explorer, you're going on a journey. And we wanted to attract a younger, new demographic that may not want to do a cruise. The ships are developed or designed not like they're like a boutique hotel. It worked well. The staff were fantastic. The sense of, okay, they had to learn the lifestyle of living on a ship. You've got safety drills and you've got public health drills and things like that. The one area we struggled, and it hit me as soon as we started getting guests on board, it was really interesting. The things you don't think about when you're doing your recruitment and your product setup is that, we started getting comments from guests about housekeeping, the suite attendants. We call them suite hosts. And they're saying, we never met our suite hosts. Well, in cruising, it's very common that you get to know the person who cleans your suite. Well, on land hospitality, it's the opposite. You don't want to meet the person who cleans your room. It's, they sneak in when you're gone and they sneak out before you come back. And that's success. And so when I started looking at those comments and initial feedback, and I said, wait a sec, I think I identified the challenge that we have here. So we worked with the team and the staff were quite shocked. What do you mean? They want to get to know me? I said, yes, it's a cruise thing. Even though we're not supposed to be a cruise line per se, there's an expectation that they're spending 7, 10, 14 days on board. They want to get to know their suite host who's taking care of them. And so we changed that and we worked with that. And it gave us an opportunity to say, hey, wait a sec, we haven't thought of everything. And while there were some great benefits of recruiting from land, don't forget there are still some uniquenesses of how do we attract, that same skill set, but then put it into a cruise ship environment. So, those are the main things that I look at and what we can do as employers, as an industry to ensure that we're attracting people. And again, I think I go back to the main point is that we've got to sell what we do, because I can go back now in hindsight and say to someone younger and say, listen, look at all the things I got to do. I mean, I'm just so fortunate. I pinch myself. It's been a rewarding, incredible career. I'm still involved in it in many ways and all the things I got to do. And these are the things, but you don't see that when you're getting a job as a midnight bellboy at a hotel, working on Friday and Saturday nights when everyone else is going to the clubs and concerts and stuff. You don't see it at that time. However, it's important that, like anything in the world, a lot of things have gotten easier, but, to be successful in a career, there's still a lot of sacrifice you've got to put in that has a payout later on.
You mentioned, Jason, you mentioned the dishwasher. You're bringing back lots of memories. I remember I had a paper out and all that kind of stuff growing up, and I worked in a rectory for a little while. But I remember one of my first paying jobs was at a department store here on Long Island. It was going to be, I was going to work in sweaters or whatever it was and be a salesperson. And I remember, so I signed up and I was hired. And I remember the very first day they said, oh, and it was ad hoc type of hours, right? And I remember a lady from Human Resources called me, all right, we're all set to go. Your regular shift will start on, Saturday and Sunday. But we do have some hours tonight. Maybe you'd like to help out tonight. And I said, oh, okay, sure. What is it? Dishwashing. I said, dishwashing? She goes, yeah, we have we have a restaurant here in the department store, and it was called the Long Island Room. And we don't have a dishwasher this week. I said, you know what? Okay. So my very first paying job in this, I was going to wear a suit. I was going to be on the sales floor. I was in the kitchen of the Long Island Room washing the salad bar dishes and stuff. And you brought back some great memories. Hey, I was just down in the Caribbean last week for a board meeting, and just to show you, and you're right, the destinations down there, the resorts, you walk around and you can't help. And I had some access to the pier, so I was watching the ships come in. So happy to report that they are still arriving down in the Bahamas. But it was interesting. The resort that we were at, the complex, um, as I was walking through, and it was a beautiful pool, beach area kind of pathway. All along the way, there was embedded food trucks on the resort premise. And it was like, wow, look at this. This is, there was the taco truck, there was the
Yeah.
omelet truck, and it was all part of the hotel property. And I just thought that was kind of a fascinating kind of intermixing of the worlds.
Well,
Yeah.
you're seeing that a lot more. I've seen some of the newer big ships that have come out, and they've integrated food truck concepts on the ship, because that street food concept really excites people. I mean, I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. I've been in New York many times. Street food is very common. We called them chip wagons in Canada. Well, here in Australia, it wasn't so common. And the movie Chef came out. But what a way to be able to taste different cuisines and different cultures with not a large price tag. But also it helped complement a lot of areas that were lacking in infrastructure for food and beverage services. And it's also helped a lot of hotels and resorts, because it's a low cost option to give your guests more options. So you don't have to have your old kitchen brigade and the restaurants manned, and that you've got these smaller, venues that are available. So you can go and get a lobster roll or a taco or a burger or a hot dog and stuff like that. So the client thinks, well, wait a sec, I've got 24-hour food or whatever it may be, but you're not manning or having a labor cost to man, a restaurant or a buffet, a lot of places that I've done in the past, and it gives variety. But it's such an exciting concept. I think when people see food trucks, they get excited because it's different. It's unique.
The other part of the story, and congratulations for always being hardworking and thinking. But talk about a business, the wine delivery during the pandemic in the Australia. Somebody had to do it, right?
Yeah,
Pretty, pretty,
it
pretty
was
fascinating.
I remember one day I got back to the warehouse, and my good friend Sean, who ran it, the company was called Liquid Library, and he was the head librarian. I just loved that. And
What a great
we're wine
title.
lovers. Isn't it fantastic? And so when I came out of quarantine here, a friend of mine had a cafe that was reopening, and he said, "Would you like to, do you know someone?" And I said, "Well, what about me?" And so I did it. And after about 4 weeks, I said to him, I said, "Well, Joe, I said, don't let me hold you back from hiring someone full time. Cafe work was not my my thing." And then my friend Sean said, "Look, where we are, it was winter in Australia, and our western suburbs are our high-end suburbs. Normally at that time of the year, they're flying off to Europe or North America for the northern summer. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't even go interstate. So what did they do with their travel money? They went out and they ate in restaurants. And so what was normally a very slow winter season was almost like our holiday season. It was just packed, and he just couldn't keep up with demand. And so he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, look, I have to work 5-6 hours a day. It starts at about 3 p.m. In Perth, because it's early in the morning in Geneva, but I'm available in the morning, early afternoon." So I worked 4 days a week with him, and I would deliver wine, and I would be going into all these restaurants and these bars, and it was great to sell these different concepts. And one day, as I mentioned earlier, I was getting back to the warehouse, and the Sean said to me, "I just got a call from one of the new high-end gastro bar restaurants, and they said they're blown away by your service." I was like, "Really?" They go, "Well," they said, "normally the delivery guys are curious and they're a bit indifferent." And they said, "You're very pleasant." And I said, "Who is this guy?" I said, "Well, actually, he's the head of hotel operations for a cruise line, but he's a COVID refugee. So, I'm getting him at a very low cost, but he's available." So, but it showed that I took my sense of service and hospitality into everything I did. It didn't matter that I was delivering. The point is, I took on a job. I was representing somebody, and I'm delivering, whether, again, I go back to, if it's a $5 sandwich or it's five-star cuisine, the sense of service. And this is something that, one of the things when I was thinking about this subject, is something that's been lost in particularly, and I think in the Western world, is that sincere sense of hospitality, the art of hospitality. As we just are not as giving or as hospitable as we used to be, and we see this in other countries because it's more common. But again, I go back to, if you think about the memories you create for people, if you're a waiter and you have, I just read the incredible book by Will Guidara, The Irresponsible Hospitality. What an incredible book. A New Yorker, and just an incredible book. But again, it talks about, you don't know what your clients are going through, and so you could be making the difference, and it could be something so simple, and we forget that it's not just a job. It's, you're not just delivering a meal, you're not just making a drink, you're not just making a bed, you're doing something. And maybe I remember telling some of my team one time, I said, maybe that guest that's on board, maybe this is the last time they get to cruise, and this is the memory you create. You have the power to create that memory, and that has to come from within. And skills we can train, but that personality, that heart of hospitality, it does come from within, and we've kind of lost that. A lot of people in many cultures and nations, particularly I know in North America, here in Australia, is that a lot of people go into hospitality because it's what they do during college, right? It's making waits and tables, or they're waiting for a job opportunity, but they don't see it as a career. And tourism and hospitality, to me, are, you have to. I went back to when I first got into it after living in Jamaica. I said, how can people pay thousands of dollars to go somewhere on vacation? Why can't I live there? Why can't I? And I did. I lived in Whistler in British Columbia ski resort. I worked on cruise ships. I've lived in the Caribbean and in the Bahamas, and I thought, well, that was my goal. I said, well, I want to live places people spend money to go on holiday, because why shouldn't I? Because people have to do it. People have to work there, and people have to live there and support it and stuff. And so I did that. But again, it's instilling that into the next generation and saying, listen, there are opportunities. They're your Vales, they're your Key West, they're your Hawaiis, they're your so Florida. There's so many areas, and of course into the Caribbean and globally, the Maldives and Seychelles. There's a lot of places globally that you can take your skill set with you and travel the world and experience different cultures and be rewarded for it.
Jason, you talked about the length of the contract and the crew well-being, and before we got on, we were reminiscing about the Neil Diamond "Thank You Australia" concert. What I remember from that was the broadcast, that last broadcast that David Frost had hosted. When they showed that, that was the last night of the tour, right? And not everybody had gotten to see the band and the singer. But much like the hospitality industry, despite how you may personally feel as a staff member, somebody arriving that day, their expectation is, hey, this is my first day. I realize I don't necessarily know that this may be the end of your 8-month contract. So the expectation is you arrive as a guest, whether it's the cruise industry, the hotel industry, a restaurant, you expect everybody's best. And talk about pressure on an industry, right? To have to always be on, right? Whether it's the 4 a.m. overnight crew or the sweet hospitality person coming in and freshening up the room every day, you always have to be on. That's a high demand and a high bar for any industry. And then you think of the pressure, as you mentioned, about on people's well-being and being away from their families, human nature being what it is. Every so often you're going to want to just like, well, where is my lazy boy? I need that 10 minutes to be on my own here.
Well, that goes back to the point why I fought with our, I debated with our CEO at the time about, it was important that we had these 5-month contracts. And I said, I know people will want longer, but they can't give our guests what they deserve. And let's be honest, as a public, we're not the best customers anymore. We've all watched how many master chefs, and we're all experts in everything now, and we have TripAdvisor and Google reviews and stuff like that, and we threaten with Cruise Critic and stuff. It's even harder on them because they're under the spotlight, right? But really, at the end of the day, the rewards that come out of it, because there are those guests. And I used to say to my team, you're always going to have the negatives, the people that no matter where you are, what you do, they'll never be happy. That's just, there are those people. But don't forget, there's an incredible amount of people that are appreciative. And there are going to be those people that it could be, maybe they're going through a life battle. And this could be the last opportunity to go to this restaurant or on this cruise. And they said, remember that don't be jaded by, the negative Nellies. Don't forget that we live in a world that there's so many different personalities and types of people. Focus on the positives. Please try to focus on the positives. It's so important. But you're right, they're always on stage. And there's an expectation. Well, I'm the customer here, that you should be nice to me. I need to respect you and show I'm nice. I may not need to like you, but I need to my saying was, it was my hospitality professor when I was doing hospitality classes back in Canada. And he said to me, he says, there's that saying that the customer's always right. He says, I disagree. No one's ever always right, except my wife, he said. But she's always right, but no one else in the world is always right. However, the customer, the guest, is always the customer and the guest. And so at times, we have to bite our tongue and allow them to believe they're right.
Right.
If it's something ethical or moral, that's a different story. But in general, you know what? If the steak's not to your liking, it was medium rare, that's not what you think, let me bring it back to your liking. You are the customer, you are the guest. And this is where we, as in the tourism industry and hospitality industry, have to remember that the customer is not always right, but they are always the customer. And by taking care of them and whatever, shortcomings there may be, by taking care of them, they will come back and hopefully spread the word as well.
I've spent most of my career in professional services and consulting firms, things like that. And it's very similar there too. As you arrive at the new job site for the new project, they don't know that you just finished an 83-hour week. They don't know that you just did, a series of 5 straight all-nighters to get the document done, right? But all they know is you've now arrived at their site and the expectations are high as you come in and trying to work through that. A couple points, really, and I thought this was so important what you said. We often think about intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, right? The intrinsic ones can be just as important. The name recognition. Hey, good morning, Jason. Nice to see you. How are you doing this morning? I remember when I worked at the New York Stock Exchange, then Chairman CEO Dick Grasso, he knew everybody's name. I remember I had worked there only about 4 months, maybe 6, and I went to the first Christmas party, the old Vista Hotel at the original World Trade Center. And I remember Dick was walking around, and at the time he was with his son, and he introduced his son to me, and he already knew my name. Oh, David, meet Mr. Turansky. And it's like, how does he even know who I am? And that just said a lot, So that those intangibles, those intrinsic type of rewards, the recognition, hey, nice work today. Or how about, from an industry standpoint, how about sharing feedback from the guests? How does that work? Do you see a lot of opportunities for that?
It's improving, and it goes back to also explaining to the team why we do what we do. A lot of times you talk in an office and then you go out into the playing field to do, but nobody explains to the team members what we're doing. And I've always said the why is more important than the how. You just have to tell them why we're doing it. But sharing the feedback has to be balanced. I mean, it's very easy, and so most leaders are no interest in, without training how to give negative feedback, unfortunately, because it's very easy to share that and it's terrible. But the positive, how do we share that? And it's important. When I used to read the comment cards at the end of a cruise, and I would write all the names down or I'd tally them up. And then I would walk around the ship and I'd go, Glenn, you got 12 mentions last cruise. Well done. You really impacted 12 people. For them to remember your name and write your name, or they'd write a letter and go and then you would share that, and you would post that in a public area or in a meeting. You might bring attention to the situation where a certain team member had been recognized for going above and beyond, or just by doing a great job. And even more so now, it's important because these things cost nothing but a bit of time. But the return you get on that investment is incredible. And even more so because a lot of our crew members now are coming from countries that have different systems, hierarchy systems and stuff. So when they come into that and they see that I'm important, I'm valued, I'm known, that I'm a team player, I'm part of the team, that really makes them feel valued, and they'll go above and beyond for you. And so it's something that we've seen a lot more of in that feedback. There's a lot better digital ways of tracking instead of people writing comment cards, now there's things like Medallia and different sources, where people, and then it's easier to share that information. But it is something that I've seen an increase in recent years, and giving that back to the team members.
Yeah, you brought back another memory. I remember once at the stock exchange, we had like a listed company survey. And I remember my boss at the time asked me to come in, and she goes, "Oh, I just wanted to let you know, we surveyed all these companies, and not many people actually got a shout out, but you did." And it was like, that's pretty, that's, thank you. Thanks for telling me. Well, you think about it, the recruitment side is one part of it, but the retention is the other. And you gotta have both.
Important.
You gotta have both, because otherwise, as we all know, onboarding is expensive, talent is expensive,
Yeah.
and again, they are the face of what's going on. They are the service element. They are, for all intents and purposes, there's the physical part and the facilities part, but they are the guests' crews. They're the experience that people are seeing. And if they're not, if they're not being taken care of from a well-being standpoint, if they're dragging, that's gonna reflect then back on customers' experience, and they'll come back and say, I don't. So treating everybody well, getting them in the right spot, recognizing that they miss their families, recognizing the length of the contract, and the ability to have them a chance to connect, maybe experience, as you said, some of the onboard or off-board types of components of the travel experience, all makes them a well-rounded service professional. And then they're always going to be, or as best you can, ready to go and on board. For sure. Well, listen, Jason, we're coming up here. We're coming up here. The church bells here are going off in my background, so we're coming up here on the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for telling us and sharing your story with us. What a fascinating career, from dishwasher to wine to hotels to islands to food trucks. Incredible, but all underscoring the importance of people and the human element in everything you did. And thank you for sharing with our One Tourism audience your story. And we really are so appreciative of your time.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to talking to you again in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Jason. Take good care. One Tourism World, Jason Gelineau. Thank you.